always wanted to learn to crochet?
Always end up in a big tangled mess.
Well, why don't you follow along whilst I teach Nikki? Back to our channel. I'm Rachel.
I'm Nikki, and we are the Stitch Sisters.
And we've decided to try a little experiment with you today with this video. So I love to crochet, and for the last couple of winters it's become more and more a thing this time of year that I start to sit on the sofa and do something cozy rather than be in the sewing room. And Nikki has crocheted in the past, haven't you?
Yes, I have, but no more than the odd granny square. Yes. And my brain at the moment, as you will probably know from previous videos, basically just expunges any information it thinks I don't need, so I've completely forgotten how to do it again.
So she asked me if I would teach her again. Yes. And what we thought would be fun, as I know lots of you have mentioned wanting to crochet, so we thought we'd try and just film whilst we do it. So it's kind of like a fly on the wall type thing whilst I teach Nikki.
Yeah. Now
we're going to try and experiment with when we need close-ups. One of us is just going to hold the phone camera so it's nice and close and you can see what's happening, but this is by no means going to be a perfectly polished tutorial.
No, might be a bit wobbly.
It might be a bit wobbly, yeah. We're not so worried about how it looks as much as getting the point across, and we want to give you the feeling as if you're there, you're here with us trying to learn as we go.
Yes.
So we're also not going to worry about starting with the very basics. We're not going to start by explaining what crochet is and what a chain stitch is and all that kind of things. What we're actually going to do is take you step by step through making a garment. So you've decided on a pattern, haven't you?
Yes, I found a very basic one on Etsy. It's only a couple of pounds. It's called the Everyday Sweater by Hooked on Happiness.
Hooked on Homemade Happiness. It's a tongue twister. Hooked on Homemade Happiness. Hooked on Homemade Happiness.
Yes. Hooked on Homemade Happiness. We will link it underneath. It's a couple of pounds. It looked like a very basic sweater with the same stitch. Yeah. It didn't look very complicated to my kind of beginner's eye, and you agreed that it did.
I did, yeah. It's pretty much the same stitch throughout, and it's mainly rectangles, so you don't have to worry about learning increases and decreases and those kind of things. So it's a really good first project. So after we looked at the pattern, which recommended a particular type of yarn called a Karen cake, and it just so happens that you managed to find exactly the same.
Yes, so I found these readily available in the UK. Obviously you can get them worldwide. Amazon sold them, but I found them on a website called Lovecraft. They had the best kind of different colours and things like that. Yes. And I ended up going for the rainbow because it, as you can see in the picture, the sweater is striped, so as you keep going through the pattern, the colour variegates as well. So.
And that's great if you want to create something multicoloured, but the idea of actually tying on new yarns as you're working through the project is too scary. Yeah. So if you get something that's variegated like this, it will automatically change colour as you go, and then you get a multicoloured project, but without you having to worry about more than one strand of yarn.
Had you heard of these before?
No, I hadn't.
So even as a, I thought, what's a Karen cake? And that is very odd.
No, I think that's just what she chooses to call. I mean, she's not necessarily called Karen. That's just the name of this particular, and I think it's maybe just to highlight the unusual kind of shape of it.
Yes,
which is very cute and a really nice way to be able to see all the colours
Absolutely.
that are in there.
Yeah.
But Nikki's been lucky because she's been able to find exactly the right yarn for her project, exactly the same one. You could substitute, so if I just show you on here, it does give you some information on the label there. So this says that it's a number 4 weight. Now that's basically, it describes it as medium, but I would say that the closest thing to this is going to be an Aran or a worsted weight yarn. So if you don't have something that says 4, look for those terms.
Yeah.
Worsted is slightly thicker than Aran, but you could still get away with it. And the other thing is that you could use a chunky, which is going to be just slightly thicker than this. But one of the first things that you do when you've decided on a pattern is to create what's called a gauge square.
it's already getting complicated.
All we're going to do is we're just going to, as if we're doing it from start, from the beginning of the pattern, we're just going to talk you through the different steps. So before you can even think about what stitches you're going to do, or kind of, you know, what size you're going to make or whatever else, you first of all need to make sure that your yarn is going to be a good fit for the pattern.
Yes.
And it might not be exactly the same, especially if you can't get exactly the same yarn, which is why you have to do what's called a gauge square. Now, gauge square is simply the number of stitches and rows that will fit into a 4-inch square or 10 centimetre square. So every pattern will give you a gauge, and it will tell you in a 4-inch square how many stitches and how many rows of which particular stitch the pattern recommends would fit in that space. And then what you would do is go ahead and sew one. Now, sew one, crochet one. Sew it, that fits the object. So this is one that Nikki has already made ahead of time, okay? And we're going to explain all of this, don't worry. We're going to explain all of these stitches as we go. But this is basically, in the pattern, it told us to do 12 stitches across and then 8 rows. Now, this stitch in the pattern is called a double crochet. It's a bit confusing because in the UK we would call this a treble, but most patterns are actually use US terminology anyway.
So it'd be a double in the US.
Yes, so it's abbreviated as a DC. You'll see that loads on patterns, and it's basically this long, tall kind of column that you get here. So if you have a look there, you could count that there are 12 columns across. And then you can see that there's almost like a straight line running across, and that intersects the rows. So we know that this is 1 row, 2 rows, 3 rows, 4 rows. So this is basically 12 stitches wide by 8 rows long. And what we now need to do is measure this to see if it's 4 inches square, and that will allow us to see whether we need to make any adjustments. So we can see from here that this is exactly 4 inches wide. So that means that the crochet hook that's recommended by the pattern, which is actually a number 5 on this is a 5 here. This is Nikki's special holder, which is designed to make it a bit easier on her hand. I don't like using it personally.
Ergonomic,
I find it too bulky because I'm used to a normal hook, but this helps some people. But it's a number 5 hook, and so us doing our 12 stitches across with a number 5 hook has given us exactly 4 inches. So that's perfect. We know that we're using the right hook size. But if we turn it the other way, then you'll see that actually lengthwise, or height-wise, it's actually coming out closer to 4.5. And what that means is that the rows are a little bit too tall. They could do with being a bit smaller. Now, we can't change the hook size because if we do that, it will also end up narrower and then we won't have the 4 inches. So we want to stick with this hook size of 5. But the row height can be adjusted slightly by tension. Now, tension is just how tight you hold the yarn as you're crocheting, how small and neat your stitches are. If as you're working your stitches, you keep the yarn quite loose, then you're going to have loose tension. And if you keep it tight, you're going to have tight tension. And if you were to work with a slightly tighter tension on this square here, then you could reduce the height of that and get it down closer to 4. Now, because Nikki's a beginner and because tension is actually different for different people and it's quite hard to master, then there's another way. If we're only affecting the length here, there's another way that we can look at it. So Nikki generally adjusts her sewing patterns to add extra length in the body, don't you? Because you don't like them to be too short. So we're not going to worry too much about the fact that the gauge square has come out a little bit long, because if it means that the sweater overall is a little bit longer, that's probably going to be a good
beneficial
fit for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also you always add length to the sleeve as well, so similar situation. But what we will be able to do is when we get to the point where the body pieces and the sleeve pieces are almost done, we'll be able to hold them against us. And if we feel like the length is maybe a bit too much, we can leave off the last couple of rows or whatever before we actually change to do the rib stitch, which is going to finish off the bottom edges. So that's another way of doing it. But again, you know, if you If you get to this point where you've bought your yarn, you've got your hook, you're following the pattern, you've done your gauge square and it's not right, then this is what you can do, because you might be using a different kind of yarn. So if your gauge square has ended up too big and specifically too wide, then what that means is that each of your stitches is a little bit too bulky. And so for you to get smaller stitches, you're going to need to go down a hook size. And you only go down one hook size at a time. So for instance, this one is a 5, so we would try with a 4. If your gauge swatch has ended up a little bit too small, then it means your stitches are too small, and so you're going to need to go up a hook size in order to make those stitches bigger, and that will then give you the width that you need. So if we were getting small stitches, then we would use a bigger hook. Now, that's the thing that most people really struggle to get their head around, because you're kind of doing the opposite of what you think you should be doing. So if your yarn is too thin, you need a thicker hook to kind of make up the difference, if you like.
Yeah.
That will mean that there's bigger holes in your crochet, and overall it will be a bigger size. And if your crochet, if your wool is too thick, then you should go down a hook. That will mean you have smaller holes, and therefore it will make that thicker yarn smaller overall. One thing to consider with that though is drape. It is going to affect the way that the finished crochet drapes, because it's the holes in it that gives it the movement. So if you've got a thicker yarn and you've had to substitute with a smaller hook, then those smaller holes is going to mean it's fairly stiff and it doesn't really move that much. And depending on the type of yarn, so if it's just an acrylic like we're using, that might be a bit too stiff and uncomfortable. But if it was something nice and fancy like an alpaca or something mohair or something that was lovely and soft, then it probably would be fine. So there's all those things to consider. And I know already it's going to seem really, really scary. So we're going to stop talking now and we're going to start showing you how to actually start off. Whether you're doing a gauge swatch or whether you're actually starting on your sweater, then we will show you how to do those basic stitches.
Lovely. Let's do it.
So now that we've done our gauge square as a test, we've learned what we need to from it. We want to keep that yarn in case we need it. So I'm going to get Nikki to unravel her hard work.
I just pull. And
just pull and it will all just come undone.
You can do my ruling for me.
If you ever, when you're undoing it, if you ever get to a point where it kind of jams, if you like, it means that at some point with your hook, you've managed to go through the fibres of the yarn and it's just caught in one. So if you give it an extra hard tug, you can usually break that little bit of fibre and then tear it away again.
I think that's what I find one of the most difficult things, is that kind of not splitting the wool. But I guess it's just practice, isn't it? So
it is, but it's also the kind of yarn that you choose. So for instance, a cotton yarn, generally the strands separate much easier. So it's sometimes it can be quite
really
difficult to make sure you've always got all of the strands on the yarn.
Recycling.
There we go. Okay. So now the first thing we're going to do is show you how to create a slip knot, which is always going to be the first thing that you do before you can actually start a chain. So first thing we're going to do is create a slip knot. Now most people have already tied a slip knot for one reason or another, and there are lots of different ways to do it, but the easiest way for me, I'm right-handed, so I'm holding the yarn in my right hand and I've got the tail in my left hand here. And then all I'm going to do is to wrap it around my finger like that to create a loop, and then I'm just going to bring it behind and push it through and pull into a slip knot. Now you can do this as many times as you need to, but the important thing is to make sure that the working yarn, which is the term we use to say that it's still attached to the rest of the ball, that is the one that moves. That's the one that you can move in and out of the knot, and not the tail. So I'll show you what it looks like when it's wrong. So if I did it this way round and then I pulled the knot through, you can see that it's actually tail that's moving and not the working yarn, so that's no good. So if you do it that way round, then there you go. Now there's lots of people that do it with a hook, and they'll kind of, you know, do the same thing on the hook, but as if rather than around my finger, do it around the hook and then pull it through and all that kind of stuff. I've never got on with that. So I think the easiest thing to do is just get your slip knot right first. You can make it as big as you need to start off with. And then once you're sure that it's right, you can go ahead and you can pop your hook in, and then you can pull on your working yarn to make that nice and tight. Not too tight, it needs to be able to move up and down, but closed on the hook.
Do you need to leave that tail? Does that tail need to be a particular length?
No, it can be any length you like, really. Anything too long is going to get in your way, and anything short is going to be, because it helps to actually hold on to that tail when you start making your chain. So if it's too short and you can't quite hold it, so I would say sort of 4 to 6 inches is perfect. Like that there. Okay, so now I've done a slip knot. Let's get you to do one.
Okay. Right, so you said I had to wrap it around my finger. And then peel it off, and then I bring the wool that's attached through the hole, like that.
Okay.
Is that right?
Check which one is moving.
It's the right one.
Yay! Okay, excellent. So now you can pop your hook in and pull it tight.
There we go. Okay. Still can move it up and down.
Excellent.
Lovely. Step one complete.
Step one complete. So now we've got our slip knot, we're going to start our chain. So what I like to do is to put some tension on the working yarn like this, okay, so that you can actually kind of move your hook against it. And then you want to hold the tail of your yarn out of the way. So I'm just going to tuck that in my other fingers and bring that in out of the way. Now, it doesn't matter how close it is. When you first start, you probably want to be quite close to the hook. But however you choose to hold it is fine. But essentially what we're trying to do is to wrap the yarn around the hook and then pull it back through the one that is on there. Now you can see that if I'm not holding both, it's actually really hard to get that through. So if I just try and do that without any tension, I can't really get it through. So what you need to do is to try and hold both at the same time, and I find it's easier to have them moving in opposite directions. I also like to have my finger kind of up away from my hook, because it just means that the yarn is up and it's not kind of going down. It's easier to maneuver when it's out or up, that's what I find. And then what you want to do is actually make the hook do the work. So just hold your yarn where it is. You don't need to do anything with that. You're going to do everything with the hook. So you're going to slide your hook in and you're going to grab the yarn, and then you're going to pull it back through the loop that's on the hook. That's all it is. There's no right way as to whether you go under the yarn and pull that through, and then you just keep moving up the chain to hold it out the way, or whether you go that way and pull it through. It's entirely up to you. I personally find that going under makes it a little bit easier, because then I can catch it every time, whereas if I come the other way, I have to almost kind of turn the hook and force it to go through. So it's up to you what you find natural. But I would say just sit here doing this for as long as you can be bothered, until you feel like you can do it really quickly with lots of speed, and you're just wrapping it round and pulling it through, wrapping it round and pulling it through. And you'll notice that I keep moving my finger up the chain, so I'm always holding at the bottom of the top of the chains, and I'm just at the bottom of the hook there, just to keep that nice and taut, and I'm keeping the working yarn taut as well, and just pulling them through. So that is a chain there, okay. And you can just go ahead and if you find you've done too many or you've not done enough, then literally just pulling on the end is going to unravel it until you get back to just your slip knot. So let's pass it to Nikki and get her to do a chain.
Just like that.
Yes, just like that. Just as many as you feel like you need to do.
That was an extra little bit. If you pull it through, and I find that if it feels a bit tight, then you've probably not pulled it through properly.
Yeah, you might have only got a few of the yarn strands or something.
You've split it or something like that.
Yeah. And actually, the more you use the same piece of yarn, the more you unravel it. And then, so obviously you've done a gauge square, and then we've
Yes.
Undone it, and then I've done a chain and undone it. So that actually helps the bits separate more. So it just becomes easier and easier to make mistakes when you're reusing that yarn. Okay, so chains, there we go. Right, so the next thing to show you is how we actually count the chains, because that can be a little bit tricky for people to kind of work out what it is that they're seeing. So let me just show you. So this hook, this one here that's still on the hook, that doesn't count as a chain. But
because it's not finished yet.
Because it's not finished, it's still on the hook. But what you want to do is see where the yarn is coming out of that. And you can see almost like ears of corn. You've got one coming this side and one coming that side. And if you look all the way down the length of chains, you can see these ears of corn. And that's how you count them. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on. Okay, so that's how you count your chains to make sure that you've got the right number. So going back to our pattern, the gauge square on our pattern said to do 12 stitches and 8 rows. Now, there's something a little bit tricky when it comes to deciding exactly how many you need to chain in order to get the number of stitches. Now, the main stitch in this pattern is a double crochet.
Yes.
And what that means is that you need to allow 2 chain stitches to kind of make up the height of the row.
Because it's a tall stitch.
Because it's a tall stitch, that's right. So if we were to just chain 12, then our first stitch would actually be in the 3rd chain from the hook, and that would mean that we'd only end up with 10 stitches. So what we need to do is to add an extra couple on, so that can go up the side, and then when we do our first stitch in the 3rd chain from the hook, we're still going to have 12 stitches as we go along. Okay. So if you can get us to 14 chains, sorry, I nearly forgot then, 14. And then we can show you how to do the double crochet stitch.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I've got more than 14.
Yeah, so you might need to just strip them back until we've only got 14. That's taken a few too many off there.
I have done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
Let's just do that again and let me actually film you counting.
I'll hold it on my knee like that because it's nice against my jeans. So
how many have we got?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
Okay, so we need one more.
One more.
Go ahead and pop one more in.
She says like it's going to be really quick for me today. There, right.
Ta-da! 14. Okay, lovely. So let's now show you how to do a double crochet stitch.
Lovely.
So when I said before about the first stitch being in the 3rd hook from the 3rd chain, so we've got this one here, that's not a chain, so that's our first one there, and then we've got our second one there. Now they're the ones that are just going to be making up the sides, so we're going to be doing our first stitch in this one here, this 3rd one, okay? So a double crochet is done with 3 different stages, and you'll hear a term used a lot in crochet, which is yarn over. And when you do your chain stitch, that's all it is. It's yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. But what we're going to do now is we're going to do it as if we're doing our chain stitch. We're going to yarn over, and then we're going into this 3rd crochet, this 3rd chain here. So we're going to pop that through there. Now when I say through, I mean the hole between the 2 ears of corn. So we've got one there, and we're going in the hole that's in between them. And if you're in any way unsure, it's also the same hole that the next stitch above it is coming out of. So let me go back there. So we yarn over, and then we're going to put it through that 3rd stitch like that. Then we're going to yarn over again and pull that back through. So we've now got 3 chains on the hook. So then we're going to yarn over again, and we're going to put it just through 2 of the chains, okay? So it helps if you hold the base of the stitch there, so you can hold your hook through, and then you've got 2 loops still on the hook, and then we're going to yarn over again and pull that through, and that then gives us our first double crochet. Now it's going to look all squinty and weird at the moment because one stitch isn't really enough to make it stand upright yet, but as we do the next one it will start to fall in line.
Just show me where the next one's going on the chain. So
the next
before
one,
you do it.
So you can see that the stitch we've just done is in here. So it's the next hole down, it's this one here.
Because this stitch has almost made that hole a bit bigger because you've been going in and out of it.
That's
so
right,
you need to not be tempted to put one in there again.
Exactly right, yes. So we're going to go in this next one, okay? So we're going to yarn over and then put the hook through that next stitch, yarn over, and pull it back through. And we've got 3 loops on the hook. Yarn over and pull through 2 loops, and so we've got 2 loops on the hook, and yarn over and pull through both until we've got 1. So that's now 2 double crochets done. I'm going to do one more because it'll be easier for you to see what I mean about the chains going up the side. So let's yarn over, we're going in this next one here, and then we'll pull it through, yarn over through 2, and then yarn over through the last one. Okay, so what's happening here, let me just take that out so it's easier to see, is you've got now, this is starting on our row, you can see it's starting to form a second kind of row, and this is the height of the double crochet stitch, and we've got 1, 2, 3 of those. And then these 2 chains on the end here, which was 13 and 14, that's just allowed the chain to go up and make up the height of that row. Because if we had just done 12, like we said, we would still have had to start in the 3rd chain from the hook, and then we would only have had 10 stitches left. So the extra 2 just allows us to go up the side. Now let me, whilst I'm here, show you what I meant by the tension. Okay? So if we go ahead and do the next stitch, we're going to yarn over through the stitch, yarn over and pull up. Okay, so I've now got my 3 loops on the hook here. Now if I give that a little tug, you can see that I can make those loops quite big, and it's actually easier to work when they're like that. So I'm going to then yarn over again and pull through. Now what that's going to do is mean there's a lot more movement in that stitch, and it's a lot taller. Whereas if I do the next one with a tight tension, so yarn over and pull through, yarn over, now I'm going to hold the yarn tight, and I'm going to keep those loops really tight on the hook. And then I'm going to pull through, and again I'm keeping it tight the whole time, and then doing the same again. So what I've ended up with here is a very tight stitch and a very loose stitch. Now if I was to do tight stitches all the way along, then my row height would be smaller. Yes. And if I was to do loose stitches all the way along, then my row height would be taller. Yeah. So if I need to change the length, if I've got the right gauge and stuff, my gauge tells me that I've got the right hook and I've got the width right, then what I can do is just to tighten or loosen the tension of the yarn to affect the row height. Now the pattern that we've chosen is very, very forgiving, so don't worry too much about your tension. We decided this would be a great one because if it ends up a little bit big, it is oversized, and so you wouldn't really notice. But if it ended up a tiny bit small, again, it's oversized, so you wouldn't really notice. And that's a really good first pattern. It has room for error, which is good when you're a beginner. Absolutely. So what we're going to do is I'm going to strip that back. So we're just back to our 14 chains. And then it's your turn. And love yours that. Too. Right, here we go. Lovely. Okay. What I'm going to do first, I'm just going to make sure I know where the stitch is. So it's not that one, it's not that one, I'm going in there. Okay, this hole here. Yeah. So yarn over. I've lost the hole already. Hold on, 1, 2. That one, there. So that's the one on your hook. Take that off. Yeah, you can see. Oh, hold on. Let me hold it so you can see. So that's 1, that's 2, and that is number 3. So 3. Okay. It's always the worst bit in there. Yes. And it's actually really hard when you're doing your first stitches into a chain. It's really hard because you've got nothing to grab hold of really.
Yarn over and through 2.
That's right.
And then yarn over and through the last 2.
That's right.
Now, what I get fussy with is how I'm holding my wool. But I think, just as a word of advice to everybody, that don't worry too much about it. You'll find your own way.
Yeah, this first row, it's literally just about getting through it because it's awkward, it's fiddly, it's small. As the piece grows, it's much, much easier to work with. So if you just get through the first row, and to be honest, who's really paying attention to that single first row on your garment? So, you know, it's not like, it's the rest of it where you'll find your rhythm and things will look a lot more uniform. If the first row is a bit wobbly, you won't notice once you've got a few more rows in.
I'll be so chuffed just to have made something that I can wear. I really won't care. If I can remember how to crochet all the way through. But that's why we chose something with the same stitch. So you should be able to get into a good rhythm eventually.
Exactly. Now let's keep filming you doing the rest of the row so we can show people what to do at the end of the row. But what we'll do is we'll speed it up. Miss one there, did we?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Did I?
See, just let's get close in so everyone can see. So, just there. So, can you see?
Oh yeah.
That we didn't go into that one. We went straight into that one. So if you undo that last one,
it gets tricky at the end, I think.
Oh, we've undone 2 there.
That's okay. Doesn't matter. I'll go back a bit. This could be the longest video we ever film.
That's right, because if people are following along,
yeah,
then they're going to be taking just as long. That's the thing. It's all very well seeing something be done in super speed.
But you're not going to be watching it unless you're interested either, are you? So am I that right?
So yeah, so you've got 1 in there now. So you've got 2 more to go. And then the last one is right next to the knot, so that's how you know you're on your last one. Okay, so first thing we need to do is to count them and make sure that we have 12. Okay, so this first bit here, this is our chain, all right? So we want to make sure that we don't worry about that. Now I can immediately see that we've missed a few, okay?
Oh, fine.
So let's first of all count how many there are. So there's 1, 2, okay, then we missed one there.
Yeah.
3, 4.
I missed
one. We missed one there. 5.
I missed one there.
No, I think you've got that one. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we've got 10, but we've got 2 spaces. So that is where we've missed them. So we're going to have to strip it back to this last one here so we can make sure we put one in there and pop one in there. Okay. So that is our first space that we missed.
Oh yeah, I can see it now that you take it back.
That is our second space that we missed. Okay. So let's just get the rest done. So we've done 2. So this is number 3. And then number 4. I really do find this very awkward.
With my ergonomic handle?
Yes, number 5. Because people have different ways of doing crochet. So you do it like that, which is why that's handy. But I hold it like a pencil. So I find it quite bulky.
We used to joke that you hold it like a lady.
Like a lady, a
dainty
lady.
Like a little lady. Whereas I'm like a digger driver.
Well, I'm like a pencil, you're like a knife.
A knife, yes.
You're eating your dinner.
Yeah. Skipping it all
writing
up.
a letter.
Yes. A very fine letter
now,
to
this
a handsome
is actually
gentleman.
a good thing to see because you can see how this is curling back on itself, and that can be a little bit annoying to start off with. Now, if your piece is big enough, then you can kind of hold that out of the way as you go. But when you're working with a smaller piece, that can be quite hard to do. So it's a bit annoying, but it's just one of those things, as it gets bigger, you won't have to worry about it. So we're just doing the last two now, and then we can count them and make sure we've got 12. Wouldn't it be funny if we didn't again? And I missed one too. Okay, so now we're not counting this here because this is the 2 chain that went up the side.
Yeah.
So the first actual kind of column or double crochet stitch is this one. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Yay!
So what we need to do now is to turn it and start another row.
Okay.
So to do that, if you remember, we've got our 2 chain that allowed us to go up.
Yes.
So we need to do another 2. So 1, 2, okay, that's going to go up and start the next row. Then we're going to flip the whole thing around like this.
Go back in the other direction.
And we're going to go back in the other direction. Now this time, in terms of being able to see which stitch you're going into, it will be easier because if you turn it so you are looking at the top of your piece, you can see that you've got those ears of corn going all the way down.
Yes.
So we can see that that is the first chain, that is the second chain. So this is the first stitch that we're going in. Now the main difference after you've done that first row into your chain stitch is that when you're doing it now, you're not going in the middle like you were when you were doing it on just the chain.
Yes.
You need to go under both loops.
Oh.
So what that means is the hook is going from front to back, and if I turn it like that, you can see that both of those loops, both those ears of corn are now on the hook.
Okay.
So that's it on the next one there. And then on the next one there.
Lovely.
Now there are stitches, and we'll use them at some point in the pattern when you create ribbing, where you only go through the back loop or you just come through the front loop. But for general crochet, you want to go through both of those loops. Okay, so we're going to just do exactly the same thing again, ignoring the first 2 chain, yarn over, and we're going to go through both of those, so it will look like you've got 4 on your hook.
Yeah.
And then you're going to yarn over and pull through, and you've got your 3 again. Yarn over 2, yarn over 1.
Lovely.
And then yarn over, we're going under both of those ears, pull through, and then yarn over and yarn over. Okay, so now we're starting our second row. So we've got our 2 chain to help us go up, and then we've got our second row that's just starting as we go along. I'll do one more. And so yarn over, pull through, yarn over, yarn over, yarn over, through the stitch, yarn over, yarn over. So you can see the second row starting to appear.
Lovely.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you've got to that stage and you're also doing a gauge, what you'll need to do is to continue that. So you'll need to continue that for 8 rows. So our chain doesn't actually count as a row. That's just what's called a foundation. It's what gets us started, okay? It's so you can create a stitch in something. So we've done that now. So our first row was actually our first row of double crochet, and we're just starting this second one here. So what you need to do is continue along that row, do your 2 chain to go up, turn it, and then go across to the 3rd row, 2 chain, turn it, 4th row, and do it until you've got 8 rows if you're following this pattern. If you're following a different pattern, then it will tell you how many stitches and how many rows should be in your gauge square. Then once that's done, you can go ahead and you can measure that and make sure that it is the size that it's supposed to be, or if it's not, that it's a difference that you can live with, or make an adjustment with your hook so that you can get it to the right size. If you're a beginner, it's best not to just guess. So if your gauge square is off and you need to change your hook, do another one. I know it's time consuming and it's a pain because you just want to get on with making the thing.
It's practice though, isn't it?
It's all practice, yeah. And it means that after you've spent hours and hours creating something, you can actually wear it. There's nothing more frustrating than not getting it right, and then you've finally done it and it's taken you like 40, 50 hours, even more, and then you can't wear it because it's not quite right. It's too big or it's too
Ginormous or too
small
small.
or whatever. So it's worth just taking that time. And like you
Yeah.
said, it's getting you faster and you're
Yeah.
just doing a better job
Yeah.
as you go. It also helps, whatever your tension starts out at, you'll probably find that it changes as you improve.
Okay.
So most people will start out with quite a loose tension, but it will tighten up the more crochet they do.
Okay.
So the more of these you do, then
the more accurate your last piece will be.
yeah,
hopefully.
exactly. And
Yeah.
another thing, just like with your fabric kind of swatches and those kind of things, you can, just for practice and just for fun, get a few different yarns together and just make some gauge squares. If you make them all the same size, you can always sew them together and turn them into something at some point. But it just means that then, you know, you're getting used to kind of what hook size you've used against which yarn and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the next step. Now, the last thing that we're going to go over just on this section of the video, because then what we'll do is we'll get Nikki to actually start on her project, and then we'll come back and film another section when we're ready to show you something new.
Yes.
So when it comes to a pattern, just like any other dressmaking pattern, you need to choose your size.
Right. Yes.
And most crochet patterns for garments will be multi-size. Some of them are just one size, and you have to check the final measurements and make sure that that's going to fit you. And obviously, because generally with knitted things, it's outerwear, it's a cardigan or it's a jumper, so they are supposed to have ease in them. They are supposed to not be skin tight. They are supposed to fit you with a little bit of room, and you have to check that it's enough room for your liking. Very rarely will patterns tell you exactly how much ease, so they won't say kind of 6 inches on the bust or something like that.
Okay.
So you kind of have to know how you like things to fit. And the best way to do that is to find a jumper or a cardigan or something that you've already got in your wardrobe that you like the fit of, and just measure the circumference of it at the chest area. Or even easier, lay it flat, measure it from armpit to armpit, and then double that, and that will give you your chest circumference. Some patterns give you the measurements as flat, so it will tell you the kind of chest measurement. And if it looks like it's way smaller than any human chest could be, that's because it's half and because it's been done flat. And then you just have to compare that to the size chart on the pattern. So we've done that for you, haven't we? And we've decided, what do we decide in the end, a medium or
a medium?
large?
I think a medium is fine.
Okay, lovely. So we're going to go with a medium from this pattern.
Yes. Okay.
So let's just quickly look at the pattern and see.
I've never been able to understand patterns. That's why we started doing it this way, because it's all just gobbledygook to me. So I just thought this is a really good way to teach you, as Rachel's teaching me too.
Yes. So let's just read it out. So small, medium, large, extra large, 2X and 3X. The pattern is written in these sizes consecutively. For example, when the pattern gives the end of the row count as, in brackets, 64/70/76. 64 is for small, 70 is for medium, 76 is for large. And then it gives us our approximate finished sizes. So the bust on a size small would be 40 inches, the bust on a medium would be 44. Now you've got a 38-inch bust, which means that's 6 inches of ease, which you're happy with.
But I'm also crocheting a little tiny bit larger, so that's kind of, it's going to take me a little bit larger than that.
It's going to take you longer for sure. Yes,
that's and longer. Yes.
Now, not all patterns do, but on this one it does also give you the length, the overall length, the armhole depth, which is basically this depth here.
Okay.
So the amount you can fit your arm into, and then the sleeve length, so that you can work out if you need to add them. She also very kindly says that it's a size small pictured, and that she's 5 foot with a 34-inch bust, so it gives you an idea of the fit overall.
Yes.
It's a very loose fit on her, and her bust is 4 inches smaller than you. So you can have a look at that and you can think, so yours is going to fit slightly tighter than hers does on her, but still going to have some room in it.
Lovely.
Okay. So for the front and back panels, of which we're going to make 2, it says to chain 9, and then it says to leave a long end for sewing. So what that means is that the tail that we made when we chained, We only left one that was 4 to 6 inches. But if you leave a much, much longer tail, say 20, 30 centimetres, then it means that when it comes to joining the pieces together, you'll be able to put a yarn needle on, and then you'll be able to weave that back in through the garment in order to hide the tail, or use it to sew the panels together. Okay, so we're going to be doing oh, hold on a minute. The first thing we're going to be doing with this pattern is actually a single crochet. So we're going to be going straight in with the ribbing. So sometimes patterns are done from the top down and they end in ribbing. Okay. But this one is done from the bottom up, so it starts with the ribbing.
And that's what SC means.
SC is a single crochet, it's a different stitch.
Okay.
So we are going to need to show you that before you can move on with your pattern, okay? But we do know we need to chain 9, and we've done the chain, so we're all good with that. And then what we're going to be doing is doing a single crochet, and then we're on the next row, we're going to be doing a single crochet BLO. Now this is back loop only. Now what that means is actually the thing you're starting with is a bit more complicated than what we've already done, but you don't do much of it. It's just creating a ribbing so that it kind of cinches it in a little bit at the base, as you often see on knits, okay? So let's just quickly show you that, then we can call this video quits.
Yes.
Hopefully it'll be under an hour. And then you'll be able to move on from there, okay?
It's fine.
Right, so let's undo this, because this is just our gauge. How many times is this poor piece of yarn going to get used?
Poor thing.
Okay, so we're going to start back at the beginning. Leave a slightly longer tail so we can use it for sewing. Okay, so we've done this before. We're just going to chain 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Okay, and then what we're going to do is, it says a single crochet in the second chain from the hook. So this is the first, this is the one that's on the hook, that doesn't count. That's the first one, that's the second one. So we're going to be doing that in there. Now single crochet, the only difference is we're not doing yarn over first, okay?
Okay.
So all we're going to do is put our hook into the stitch first, pull it through. Now because we've only got 2 loops, it's just a case of pulling it through once, which is why it's a single rather than a double. The yarn over first is what gives you the 3 loops, which is why you have to pull it through twice, and that's what makes it a double crochet. So it's a bit quicker because we're just then going to go straight into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. That's our single crochet. Let's do that again. Yarn over, pull through. And I'm just going to finish this row here so I can show you what to do next. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. Now if you've been doing double crochet, it's very easy to then slip straight back into and then next thing you know you're yarning over and you're doing a double crochet when you were supposed to be doing singles. You can immediately see when you've done that, because you can see how much taller that one is. And it means that your piece will go whoop. So you'll know that you can just pull it back until you did your last correct stitch, which was just a single crochet, and then just do that stitch again, but without the yarn over first. So this is going to mean that we end up with 8 single crochet, which is what the pattern tells us we need. So let's just count those. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Lovely. Okay, nice. So next thing it says is to chain 1. So whereas we would chain 2 to turn for a double crochet, we're just going to chain 1 to turn for a single crochet, because that row is not as high.
It's shorter. Okay.
And then we'll flip it around. And then for this row, we want to, it says to SC in the first stitch, which is a single crochet in the first stitch, and then it says SCBLO, which is to SC, or single crochet, in the back loop only. So you notice it says first stitch, not first chain from the hook. So because we've now got a little piece of work here, then this isn't attached to anything. That's just the chain at the bottom of our hook. This is our first stitch here. Now, if we were doing what we'd done before, we'd be going through the stitch and we'd have both loops on the hook there. But actually, because we're doing back loop only, we're we're just going to put it down through the middle, so it's just the back loop, and then we're going to do our single crochet. So we'll pull it through, yarn over and pull it through. Okay. And then it's easier to hold it so you can look at the top, and then you're going to go down through the back loop only, and then pull that through, yarn over and pull through. Now I'm just going to speed this up and get on and do the rest of those, because I think it helps to kind of see what it is that you're trying to achieve, because it will all make sense. So we're sticking with 8 stitches, but we're just doing them in the back.
I'd just like to point out I'm very happy for you to be doing it for me.
Well, no, you're doing it afterwards. It's just that we're going to try and keep this under an hour, so you'll be doing it off camera and coming back when it's all done. You have got...
in 3 months.
It says row 2 to row 70, so you've got 70 of these rows to do.
That's
and so have you if you're following along, so there'll be plenty of time. So what we need to do now is count them, because it can be really confusing at the end here to make sure that you've got them all. So we've got 1, and if you want to, you can look at the top as well, so we can see here this row here. So that's our first stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we've got our 8, and then we would chain 1 and turn, and it's in our first stitch. So that's not the first chain, it's the first stitch, and it's back loop only. Okay, so we're going to keep doing those single crochets, which is just back loop.
And this is just the ribbing, isn't it? This is not a stitch. The actual
Once I've done this 3rd row, you'll be able to start to see what I mean by ribbing. And any dressmakers out there will already know what ribbing is, but you buy it. It's got those kind of ridges in it. And the reason it has that is so that it can stretch. And so let me just finish this row here, and then I can show you. So you can see that we're getting this ribbed effect here, okay? And what that means is that it's allowing the whole piece to stretch and have a bit more movement in it. It'll be even more obvious if I just do one more. So now with that one, you're starting to see, because this first one's bigger because you've got the chain on it. But this is a standard sort of rib here. And if I flip it over, you can see it's the opposite on that side. So the pattern here, so we've done our row 1, which is to, we've done chain 9, we've done our row 1, which is to single crochet in the 2nd chain from the hook, and then in each chain across, and so we ended up with 8. Then we chained 1 to turn, and then we did it in each stitch back loop only, and that gave us 8 again, okay? And then what it says is to repeat row 2 up to whichever size you're making, so small, medium, large, extra large, 2x and 3x. So you're making a medium, which means that from row 2 to row 70, you're going to be doing the same thing, just flipping it around and doing that. So you're going to end up with a row of these that is basically 70 rows long. Now listen, the one thing to bear in mind is when it comes to counting rows, the easiest thing to do is to count the ridges, okay? So if we flip that over, we've got our chain, but we're not counting that. So this is a rib here, and this is a rib here. And each one of those ribs is 2 rows. So rather than worrying about which is which, if you just count each rib, then you've got 2, 4, that's 5, because I've done that side. So when we've done it the other way, that will be another ridge, so that would be 6. So you can just count in pairs until you get to the number that you need. So that is the first job for you. And for you, if you're crocheting along with us, is to go ahead and get yourself 2 rows of ribbing. In fact, no, just do 1 to start off with, because you are then going to turn it and start working your double crochets into that. So that's going to give you the waistband at the bottom. And then what we're going to end up doing is turning it, and then along the top edge, we're going to be doing a row of single crochets. And then that's going to allow us to double crochet on top of this, which is how this will end up being horizontal. But the rest of it will end up being
wonderful.
vertical.
I did wonder how that was going to stretch around my entire body, but now I understand.
No, you need 70 of them, and there you've got 5.
That's not going to fit me.
Yeah, it's also, because it starts with this, it's a good way for you to gauge how good the fit is going to be as well, because it's, as it says here, the ribbing is the width of the sweater, so easily adjust the width by adding or taking out rows. Okay. So if you've done the number that the pattern suggested, so let's say you've done 70, and then you're doubling that to give you your full width all the way around. If you feel like that's not big enough, that's not loose enough for you, then that would be a good time for you to switch and say, actually, I'm going to do the extra large, or I'm going to do the large, so I'm going to do 76 rows.
Yes.
And that way I'm going to get a little bit extra.
There's nothing as bad as when a knitted jumper is too tight at the bottom. And
I quite like it, because then I like the top to sort of hang over it, but everybody's got their own kind of preference.
I feel like it's trying to cut me in half.
Yeah, so you'll be able to gauge it by
That's good then, isn't it?
Yes. So when we come back and you've got your band done,
2027 I'll be back when I've done
hopefully next week. What we'll do is we'll then show you how to do your single crochet along the top and which of the where you're supposed to put those stitches, because you're going in a different direction. Then we'll start with the double crochet. Now, because you've already seen that will be really quick, because you'll just be doing row after row after row after row of double crochet. So it will move quite quickly from that point on.
It goes without saying that I will only be doing one at a time, and you should only do one at a time. We've got to make a front and a back. Obviously, I'm just going to do all of one, and then I'll start again and do all of the other ones.
Yeah, so exactly.
You're not
and the same with the sleeve.
We're not going to expect you to do both ribs at the same time and then be ready for the next thing. So,
no, okay, exactly. So hopefully that's been helpful for you. We had a really good response when we mentioned to people that we were planning on sharing this.
We did.
Really, we just thought if we're doing it anyway, we might as well, and see if anybody finds it helpful. So do let us know below if you feel like we've explained things well enough, if there's anything that's not quite clear, because what we can do is recap and answer any questions
on the next one.
Beginning of the next one. Yes. Right, okay, I need a cup of coffee now. Or wine, I'm not sure which.
Well done, thank you very much for sharing your experience.
Oh, you're very welcome, and I can't wait to see your cardi grow. It's going to be really exciting.
My jumper, I'm very excited.
Also, I know the commitment that you put into handicrafts, because I've seen her EPP, and it's insane how much she gets done. So you'll crochet way faster than I ever do, because you'll just put a lot more time into it.
I will,
And so she'll have a sweater in no time at all, whereas I've got about 6 half-made ones that are just lying around.
If I get this finished by Christmas, do you think that's doable?
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. I think it'd be way quicker.
I know
how much you love to sit with fire on in the evening and whatever.
Exactly. Glass of wine.
Yeah, and once you get the rrhythm, it'll be so fast.
My mum, what's inspired me, apart from the fact that Rachel obviously is a great crocheter, but my mum used to.
I just am a little bit better.
Well, she's better than me. But my mum used to knit, and I have vivid memories of my mum knitting while watching the television, like without even taking her eyes off the television, she'd be able to knit. And there was a wonderful year where she made me and my sister and my 3 older cousins matching kind of Argyle jumpers. You know, the ones that have the patterns that come down over the top. All in mine and my sisters were brown. You know how much I love brown.
Ooh,
and my cousins were blue, and she made 5 of them for our Christmases one year. So
fantastic.
it just makes me feel really warm and cozy, and kind of like reminds me of my mum. Kind of thing.
My mother-in-law is an amazing knitter, and she does the same. She can knock things up in no time at all, and she doesn't have to, look at what she's doing either. But I mean, just to put into context, you say I'm a great crocheter, but I can't not look. No, I can if I'm doing it, I can put something on that I'm more able to listen to than watch, and I'll just look up every now and then so I can keep tabs on what's happening. But I couldn't sit there like that and not actually. No way at all. No.
Anyway, I won't be doing that. That's for sure.
Excellent. Right. Okay. Well, we will see you for part 2 very soon. And if you're going to give it a go, good luck. And we can't wait to hear how you get on.
See you on the other side.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel for lots more sewing and style content.
And if you're inspired by our makes, why not check out our online sewing classes where we can help you to learn to sew and improve your sewing skills.